What's up, everybody? I wanted to do a small video for you on modifiers, light modifiers. So specifically what I mean by that is whether you're using flash or if you're using constant light, basically just light bulbs to light your subject, it's important to know that there are different type of light modifiers out there. Basically because at the end of the day, whether or not you're using one of these flashes, a studio strobe, some light bulbs in a box, the important thing to know is once you get that light on your subject, on the clothing, it's how you modify it is what's going to make the difference between harsh light, not enough light, too much light, soft light, pleasing light. That's going to be the biggest difference. In photography, when we start introducing flash, the flash isn't necessarily the important part. And that's because at the end of the day, the light that comes out of this, the light that comes out of that, the light that comes out of those Philips light bulbs I got from Lowe's, or the somewhat expensive Nikon flash, is really still just light being put out from something. So it's how you take the light and modify it that's important. All this studio equipment is just different ways for me as a photographer to modify the light. This guy right here that I've shown before is called the strip box, and it's really just a box that's in a shape of a thin rectangle, and they come in different sizes, but it's really just like a strip of light. So when the light that comes out of this gets sent out, it's getting sent out in a long rectangular kind of form, and that's why I use it for the clothing, because we're generally shooting everything that's up and down. The light that comes out of this, you can see the way that it's aiming, it's going to be a little bit more square, and it's going to be sending it in that direction. I could rotate this on going up and down, and it would go a little bit more in that direction. This right here is called a honeycomb grid. It's really just a grid that goes in there so that when the light comes out, it gets a little bit more focused than spread. So if I want the light to be more focused versus spreading out once it leaves the box. This over here, this is basically just a really big version of exactly what Shelly was using, except for the fact that there's no back. The one consultant, the pictures you've seen, it's just an umbrella. It's just the important thing to take away from this guy is the fact that I've got this studio strobe in here, which the flash doesn't, the fact that it's a strobe doesn't make a difference. It could be a speed light, a regular flash, could be constant light. The thing to take away from this is I've got the light aimed into the umbrella. It's going to fill the umbrella with light and bounce back out. This particular umbrella has a cover that goes over the front. So basically when the light goes through the umbrella, it hits the back of the umbrella and comes back out, it gets diffused by hitting the back of the umbrella. So it means it basically gets softened a bit. And it then passes through this kind of semi-transparent material, which means it gets diffused again. And that essentially makes the light that's coming out of here a lot softer, a little bit less power than what originally came out of here, but a lot softer. And that's going to be much more pleasing as far as once it hits the subject. The other important thing that I have to think about as a photographer, once I say, okay, great, I've got the light coming out and going towards the subject in a little bit of a softer manner, where do I put this light? That's still part of the modification, how I'm modifying the light that's coming out of the camera. If I have this still directly in front of the subject, it's going to make the subject a little different. If I move it off to the side, it's going to do something else. So the point here is these lights, whether it be a big umbrella, a strip box, a big soft box, a small soft box, a small umbrella, say from Amazon, it's how you modify the light that's important. How many layers of things does the light have to go through? If the light doesn't have to go through any layers of diffusion material, it's not going to be diffused at all. If the light goes through just one layer of diffusion material, it's going to be diffused a little bit. This is a small umbrella from Amazon that probably comes in some of your kits. If I'm aiming the light into this, it's only going through one bit of diffusion material, so it's only going to be diffused a little bit. If it's a really bright light that I'm aiming through it, it's going to be pretty much the same bright light, just a little bit diffused coming out the other side. So if you get this close to your subject, it's still going to be a harsh light. If I say had a cover on this guy and I shot the light into it and bounce back out, it's going to be a little bit nicer of a light. The point is, regardless of which lights you use, the modifiers are also important, how you modify the light. That's something that we as photographers, strange, light shaping devices like this, which is a snoot. So now the light's going to come out in a very small pattern. It's got the light shaping things like this, which is they're called barn doors. So now I can kind of pinch the light and bend it and have it go whichever way that I want, because these are essentially ways that we modify the light. I've got all of this lighting stuff and I've got just a few lights because it's more important on how I shape it and bend it than it is the actual light source that's producing the light. The last thing that I'm going to talk to you about is essentially other ways that we use to modify the light, called reflectors, and things that I put in between the lights even if the modifier doesn't diffuse it enough. And the reason why I wanted to show you those is because it's a perfect example on how the least expensive way of going about this is still just as effective as the brand name photography expensive ones. So what I mean by that is, this is a reflector. It's a round reflector that I'll use to say if I don't want another flash in a particular area, but I still want to get some light in an area. Say some of the dresses hang a certain way, and sometimes there's too much of a shadow when the light that comes from my strobe hits it. It creates too much of a shadow. So I'll use a reflector to just kind of bounce some light into the shadows, and then I take the picture and now I have much less shadows. This is a photography one. It folds up in a camera bag, now nice and flat. It's got two sides. It's got a white side, it's got a silver side, inside it's got a gold side, and a black side for when I want to stop light from hitting something. This is another reflector. It is a a piece of poster board with some tinfoil taped to the front, and this works great. It's a great size. It's one of those things where if I use it and abuse it because I want to get a particular look, or something's really, a light's hard to get into a certain spot, so I'm really trying to stick it into certain spots, and this ends up getting ruined, then I just make another one. It's not that big a deal. And that's awesome about this versus other stuff that costs more, and if I don't want to break it, I kind of have to be a little bit more gentle. This guy is my big giant, I guess, gobo, or whatever you would call it, go-between, where I essentially put it in between the light and the subject, because I might have a diffusion material on the light and it's diffusing it a bit, but I need to diffuse and soften the light that's coming out a little bit more. So I took some PVC and I sewed it to I took some PVC and I made a rectangle PVC frame, and I took some sheet and I sewed the sheet into the frame, and now I've got this big giant just kind of diffuser. And you can see that if I think that the light's coming out of something too harsh, I can put this in front of it, and now I've diffused the light a bit. It's great, plenty big, so I don't have to worry about any kind of light sneaking in. But the point of this is, they have photography versions of this that are probably expensive. I took a trip to Lowe's, bought some PVC. We probably stole the sheet from a hotel at one point at a time when Meredith and I were dating. And I sewed the sheet in here, and now I have a modifier. So again, at the end of the video, just the point is, the light, getting as much light on the clothing is important. Your camera sensor is not going to work as hard, and the picture quality is going to result in a better picture, better quality, less grain, less noise is what we call it. And so getting a lot of light onto the subject is important, but what is also just as much of important is how you modify the light and where you place the lights. If you have constant light and you're sticking it right next to the camera and it's really bright, it's going to resemble on-camera flash, and it's just not going to be pleasing at all. So that's why I want to do the video, because these are light modifiers and they modify the light. Okay, hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, just leave a comment, and I'll answer as soon as I can.